Hello, first graders. Today will be our reading for chapters 7 and 8 in Mummies in the Morning. If we remember what happened, Jack and Annie are now in an ancient time in Egypt. They've been kind of following a black cat around. They discovered what a mirage is. It's just something deceiving in a desert. The desert heat will play tricks on your eyes. So they thought they saw an ancient funeral, which they really didn't, but they followed the black cat into the pyramid, and in the pyramid they found a ghost queen. So it's been a queen who's been dead for probably, I think, 1,000 years or so, and then this queen needs help finding the Book of the Dead, and the only problem with that is her brother hid it from tomb robbers. So Jack and Annie are going to help her find this Book of the Dead, and hopefully they can make sure that this ghost queen gets to the afterlife safely. Okay, so let's get started with chapters 7 and 8. Here we are. The scroll. Jack put the scepter in his notebook and pencil into his pack. He and Annie followed the ghost queen deeper into the pyramid until they came to some stairs. "The stairs," said Jack and Annie. The ghost queen floated up the stairs. Jack and Annie followed. The ghost queen floated right through a wooden door. Jack and Annie pushed on the door, and it opened slowly. They stepped into a cold, drafty room. The ghost queen was nowhere in sight. Dim torchlight lit the huge room. It had very high ceilings. On one side was a pile of tables, chairs, and musical instruments. On the other side of the room was a small wooden boat. "The boat," said Jack. "What is it doing inside Queen Hutepi's pyramid?" asked Annie. "Maybe it's supposed to carry her to the next life," said Jack. He and Annie went over to the boat. They looked inside it. The boat was filled with many things: gold plates, painted cups, jeweled goblets, woven baskets, jewelry with blue stones, small wooden statues. "Look," said Jack. He reached into the boat and lifted out a clay jug. "The jug," said Annie. Jack looked inside the jug. "Something's in here," he said. "What is it?" asked Annie. Jack fell down inside the jug. "It feels like a big napkin," he said. "The folded cloth," said Annie. Jack reached into the jug and pulled out the folded cloth. It was wrapped around an ancient-looking scroll. Jack slowly unrolled the scroll. It was covered with wonderful hieroglyphs. "The Book of the Dead," whispered Annie. "We found it! We found her book!" "Oh, man!" Jack traced his finger over the scroll. It felt like very old paper. "Queen Hutepi," called Annie. "We have it. We found your Book of the Dead." "Silence!" "Queen Hutepi!" Then another door on the other side of the chamber creaked open. "In there," said Annie. "Maybe she's in there." Jack's heart was pounding. Cold air was coming through the open doorway. "Come on," said Annie. "Wait." "No," said Annie. She waited 1,000 years for her book. Don't make her wait any more. Jack put the ancient scroll into his backpack. Then he and Annie slowly started across the drafty room. They came to the open door. Annie went through first. "Hurry, Jack," she said. Jack stepped into the other room. It was nearly bare, except for a long gold box. The box was open. The cover was on the floor. "Queen Hutepi?" called Annie. "Silence." "We found it," said Annie. "Your Book of the Dead." There was still no sign of the ghost queen. The gold box glowed. Jack could barely breathe. "Let's leave the scroll on the floor and go," he said. "No, I think we should leave it here. I think we should leave it in there," said Annie. She pointed to the gold box. "No," said Jack. "Don't be afraid," said Annie. "Come on." Annie took Jack by the arm. They walked together across the room to the glowing gold box. They stopped in front of the box, and they peered inside. Chapter 8. the mummy. A real mummy. Bandages were still wrapped around the bald skull, but most of the bandages had come off the face. It was Queen Hutepi, Queen of the Nile. Her broken teeth were showing, her little wrinkled ears, her squashed nose, her withered flesh, her hollow eye sockets. Plus, the rotting bandages of her body were coming off. They could see bones. "Oh, gross," cried Annie. "Let's go." "No," said Jack. "It's interesting." "Forget it," said Annie. She started out of the room. "Wait, Annie." "Come on, Jack. Hurry," cried Annie. She was standing by the door. Jack pulled out the Egypt book and flipped to a picture of a mummy. He read aloud. Ancient Egyptians tried to protect the body so it would last forever. First, it was dried out with salt. "Ugh, stop," said Annie. "Listen," said Jack. He kept reading. Next, it was covered with oil. Then, it was wrapped tightly in bandages. The brain was removed by... "Yuck! Stop!" cried Annie. "Goodbye." She dashed out of the room. "Annie," called Jack, "we have to give her the Book of Dead." But Annie was gone. Jack reached into his pack. He pulled out the scroll and the scepter. He put them next to the mummy's skull. Was it just imagination, or did a deep sigh seem to shudder throughout the room? Did the mummy's face grow calmer? Jack held his breath as he backed away, out of the mummy room, out of the boat room, down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, he heaved his own sigh, a sigh of relief. He looked down the hallway. It was empty. "Hey, where are you?" he said. No answer. Where in the world was Annie? Jack started down the hallway. "Annie," he called. Had she run out of the pyramid? Was she already outside? "Annie!" "Help, Jack!" came a cry. The voice sounded far away. It was Annie. Where was she? "Help, Jack!" "Annie!" Jack started to run along the shadowy hallway. "Help, Jack!" Her cry seemed fainter. Jack stopped. He was running away from her voice. "Annie!" he called. He went back toward the burial chamber. "Jack!" There! Her voice was louder. "Jack!" Even louder. Jack climbed the stairs. He went back into the boat room. He looked around the room at the furniture, the musical instruments, the boat. Then he saw another door. Right next to the door he had just come through. The other door was open. Jack dashed through it. He found himself at the top of the stairs. They were just like the stairs in the other hallway. He went down into the hallway. It was lit by torches on the wall. It was just like the other hallway. "Annie!" he called. "Jack! Annie! Jack!" He was running through the hallway. She crashed into him. "I was lost," she cried. "I think this is one of those false passages built to fool tomb robbers," said Jack. "A false passage," said Annie, panting. "Yeah, it looks like the right hallway." It looks like the right hallway," said Jack. "We have to go back into the boat room and out the right door." Just then, they heard a creaking noise. Jack and Annie turned around. They looked up the stairs. Then they watched in horror as the door slowly creaked shut. A deep sound rumbled in the distance, and all the torches went out. Alright, so that does it for chapters 7 and 8. Again, boys and girls, you are not actually going to be doing the response journal, but I would like you to answer it maybe in person, in a conversation with somebody at home. It says, "What do you think will happen next?" So Jack and Annie are kind of lost in a tomb, or they're at least trying to figure their way out around this tomb after they gave the Book of Dead to Queen Hutepi. And now, what do you think is going to happen to them? Will they escape? Will they get lost? Will they run into somebody else? Who knows? Go ahead and talk this over with somebody at your house. And join me tomorrow for chapters 9 and 10.